I just got interested in taxidermy out of curiosity because I was wondering how do they do it, because it's such a mystery box.
I mean, I studied it the traditional way. I had to do that, sort of unlearn it and then do something I wanted to do.
These are the new breed of taxidermists. Contemporary and creative, they're making animal sculptures that are striking, graceful, and more often than not, shocking for all the right reasons. But how did we get from this to this? To find out, I've come to London's Horniman Museum and Gardens, a public museum that has more than 2,000 taxidermic sculptures in its collection. Opened in the late 19th century, the Horniman is a treasure trove of natural history preserved, whether that's a stuffed roadside fox or this exotic tiger.
During the 18th and 19th century, naturalists were going out on expeditions and voyages overseas and bringing back new animals that they would find, and obviously taxidermy was developed then to preserve those animals for people to study.
In the Victorian era, taxidermy had two main functions. It was either a vital historical record of animals, as we can see here in the Horniman, or it was a badge of honour, where animals were hunted and then stuffed.
Taxidermy's certainly been through the doldrums, I would say. It wasn't very popular sort of through the 1940s, 50s and 60s. We have to remember that, people couldn't go out and take photographs or film nature in the past. So our relationship with how we looked at nature changed quite a lot. But in recent years, sort of in the last 15, 20 years, people have started to rediscover taxidermy, and so I wouldn't say it was a dead art at all now.
Increasingly, we're seeing taxidermy move away from science and towards art. Ferry van Tongeren and Jaap Sink are two taxidermists who've seen huge success with their creations. Based in Holland, they work in partnership with antique specialist Jam here in London, and when we meet, they have just brought over 7 finished artworks.
We're inspired by 17th century painters, the animal painters, which use much more dramatic poses. Taxidermists, they use nature as a guide, so that's the difference.
Ferry and Jaap both used to work in advertising, so for them, composition is key. One of their first collections was bought in its entirety by Damien Hirst. Their company takes Charles Darwin as its starting point.
Now, Darwin, of course, is a sort of a symbol for the animal world, but there's also a quote he made saying that there would be no such thing as beauty if every animal was cast from the same mold. And that's basically the essence of what we do, because we don't use factory molds and we create every animal in a unique way. That's our way to create beauty with an animal skin.
Jaap and Ferry have built up a network of breeders and zoos across Europe. There are still a lot of misconceptions, they say, about where taxidermists get their animals from.
We're very eager to save, not save live animals because we can't, but you can also save dead animals, because most animals they end up in the destruction with a destruction company or in the garbage can. And now we sort of tend to save those very rare animals that are still in zoos and in captivity, and that's sort of a necessary thing to do for us.
Today we have left London and come to a seaside artistic paradise, Margate, We've come to meet artist Harriet Horton, who has an incredibly different approach to taxidermy than we've seen with either Ferry and Yap or the vintage pieces we saw at the museum. For her, sea creatures are the star of the show, and she can often be found scouring beaches like these, looking for her next piece of inspiration.
The sea creatures I do at the minute, I think the prawns, the prawns led me there, and it was a passion project because it was an exoskeleton. I'd not done those before, and no one was doing it, so it was such a challenge.
Harriet's work is unique. She displays her sculptures in perspex boxes, backlit by neon.
The thing that I loved is it changed the mood a bit, so it was no longer this sort of slightly macabre or menacing or quite sad taxidermy that you get in like antique shops. It was softer and it was more beautiful, and that's, I think, yeah, it just fit. It fitted exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be appreciated, but in a more gentle setting.
Harriet often works with octopi, which are mummified and then mounted. At the moment, though, she's working on a dogfish she stumbled across on the beach.
It was like the perfect find.
The idea behind taxidermy, finding a way to preserve an animal, dates all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, who mummified pharaohs' animals, as well as the pharaohs themselves. Now, these artists are seeing huge demand for their work, for a new, more artistic form of taxidermy. Is it possible that this ancient art is cool again? Miranda Atty, TRT World, London.